Hey piano players, I'm Chris Barron and I am on a mission to unleash your improvisational genius at the piano in any style. Now before we get started here, I want to let you know, on this channel I'm going to tell you stuff, I'm going to show you stuff, and none of that is going to make you a better player. Now here's the magic. When you sit down at the keys, you roll up your sleeves and you work on your expertise. So here's my challenge to you. Take what you can process, whatever you understand, and start integrating it into your playing right now. Don't wait until you understand everything to get started. I'm just here to spark creativity into your playing, but you're here to breathe life into your music. Today, we're going to reimagine practicing the piano and scales and how scales are used in improvisation. Scales are like the language of music, and it doesn't matter what type of style we're playing. If we understand the language and the principles used, we can improvise at the piano in any style with freedom. But wait, Chris, scales are hard. There's a lot of them. I gotta memorize them. I gotta practice them. Maybe we don't have a concept of how scales even apply to music, or maybe melodies. We can put a melody to a scale. Right, that makes sense. But chords, how do chords work with scales, right? Right, those are chords and they come out of a scale. They just do. And bass lines, they're all interconnected. So that's what we're going to cover, improvising with freedom using the three zones: melody, bass, and harmony applied to scales. And the secret is tetrachords. Okay, what are tetrachords? Why are you talking about them? What do they have to do with scales? And why is this going to help me improvise? We're going to define tetrachords. We're going to tell you what they are, and we're going to apply them to scales and show you how tetrachords make our scales for us. And we're going to kind of reimagine how we utilize scales at the keyboard. No longer are we just looking at them as finger exercises, but as whole musical landscapes. Then we're going to place our left and right hand on these tetrachords in a systematic way, in a predictable way, in a systematic way. I just said systematic way, in a predictable way. Now, before we get started on that, there are going to be a lot of numbers flying around. There are numbering systems for many different aspects of music, and sometimes we're throwing numbers around and we're not sure if we're referring to chords or scale tones or finger numbers, okay? So as we go through, I will do my best to let you know that I'm talking about a chord tone or a chord number or a scale tone or a finger number, okay? Numbers are the backbone of our communication system in music without getting into the theory nitty-gritty, okay? So that's how we're gonna move forward. The next thing we're gonna do after we have our hands arranged on the keyboard is we're going to work with pivot tones. And pivot tones are tones in our left hand that will change to give us major and minor categories of scales. And in the right hand, there are pivot tones that we will change to give us different colors of those major and minor scales. And that's going to be kind of cool. And in part one, we will just cover the standard major and the various minors that we're very familiar with. Then in part two, we're going to play with those pivot tones. Then we're going to start moving those pivot tones in different combinations and discover scales that we didn't even realize were a thing, okay? And as we do this, we're going to unlock 8 scales in a systematic way. Predictable, systematic, okay? And these finite number of 8 scales are going to give us this infinite number of possibilities on how we're going to use them in improvisation. Now, in that part, we're just going to discover what they are and how we got them and how to practice them. And then, in part 3, we're going to get to the nitty-gritty. Where do we use these scales? How do they apply to our playing? How does a melody work in the scale? How does a chord work with a scale? What chords do they work over? Now, this is where the world gets really big, and that's why I'm going to break down these scales in other videos, and I'm going to dedicate an entire video to one scale and blow out all the possibilities of how the scale works with many chords. And then I'll also do it in reverse and say, here's a set of chords, and here's the scale that these are all derived from. We can go back and forth. But just for this video, we're just going to cover that these scales do work for chords and key centers. So we're going to have some fun with that. So in the meantime, I'm here to help you to improvise with freedom in any style. Jazz, pop, R&B, we may even take some classical music and make it our own. So let's level up our improvisation and unlock all the possibilities with tetrachords and scales. Let's dive in.